Well, it's all about the Second Amendment. We have been talking about it in the wake of the events in Minneapolis, but it's also going to be in front of the Supreme Court this term. What's going to happen? Hi, I'm Melba Peason, also known as the resident legal diva, and I'm here with Kelly Hyman for the breakdown. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Legal AF for all things at the intersection of politics and law. So, as mentioned at the top, a lot of folks have been talking about Second Amendment rights. Who does the Second Amendment apply to? Who gets to carry in this country and who does not? And as the debate rages in terms of gun control or not and all of that, there are two cases that the Supreme Court is going to be ruling on this session that can dramatically change the landscape in terms of gun rights in this country. So, Kelly, you're going to lead off with the first one. Tell us about what's happening in Hawaii.
It all boils down to the right to bear arms. Under the Second Amendment of our Constitution, you have a right to bear arms. Now, in Hawaii, there is a law that prohibits people from bringing guns into someone else's private property without their consent. But it's being challenged on the grounds that it's running afoul to the Second Amendment. Ultimately, the Supreme Court of the United States is going to make a determination on whether or not the law is constitutional. And so what that means is if someone comes on your private property, do they need your consent or do they not need your consent to bear their arms, to bring their gun?
And what do you think is going to happen here?
It's going to be a tough balance because you have to think about someone's right, your property rights, right? Someone has their own property rights. It's your property. You own it. You have a right. But then under the Constitution, you have your right to bear arms.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's a really tough balance because it's kind of hard to dictate like what people can and can't bring into their homes. As we've seen in restaurants and the such, people post like no firearms on premises, right? Because they're thinking about safety and, so I don't think the individual rights of the homeowner, the person with the private property is going to be, dismantled this way. Because that to me is a really hard pill to swallow. I mean, we've seen these types of cases and the civil lawsuits that come from that as well in terms of, hey, you're liable for whatever happens. You know what I mean? Like the liability cuts both ways. That's where I think it's going to either get kicked back to the lower court or, I don't know, maybe the Supreme Court may punt on it and not make a ruling and really say hash out all these issues, which is a lazy way to do it, but sometimes they do, right? But I don't see that one as one where the people's individual rights to be able to dictate what happens on their private property ends up getting removed. But I could be wrong. Yeah.
You could be right. You bring up a really good point.
50-50 shot, right?
So how about the other case?
Yeah. So the other case, this one I'm watching real close because this is something that has always bothered me as a civil libertarian. As folks know, I'm former deputy director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Florida. So constitutional rights are something that's super important to me. And so, it should be to all of us, but this is something I was really immersed in for a long time. So the case is United States versus Hyman. And now this is talking about a ban on drug users possessing guns. I know the title in and of itself, you're thinking, oh, somebody who's like heavily addicted. So this is the story of a man, Ali Daniel Hamani, who basically got arrested. Turns out he had possession of cocaine and cannabis in his car along with a firearm. And so the drug charges ended up resolving themselves. He didn't get convicted on that or anything like that. But the gun charge was the problem. So he gets convicted for that. So if this kind of fact pattern sounds familiar, remember Hunter Biden? yeah, this is the same law that he got convicted under, right? That you're an unlawful user, possessor of a firearm, right? So if you are someone, when you fill out the form to get a firearm, you have to basically swear that you are not a user of illegal substances. And of course, in a broader sense, you're thinking, oh, cocaine, heroin, whatever. Cannabis is legal on the state level in many states in this country, right? So that's not a problem. But cannabis is not legal federally. So now you've got that disconnect between federal and state law, and who gets caught in the middle? The people, right? So now you have a situation where cannabis has been rescheduled from Schedule 1, which made it like, in the same league as like heroin. And it's been now dropped down to Schedule 3, which is good. This, of course, happened after this case, but still, the Supreme Court needs to address this disconnect because, just because you're seeking a different form of medical care, which is legit, which is legal, right? So let's say you get a medical cannabis card, right? So you're using medical cannabis versus taking Xanax or, whatever, right? Prozac, whatever, right? So you're using that lawfully in accordance with your state's rules and regulations, but you also have your firearm. Now, just because you have cannabis in your house doesn't mean that you're going to run the streets and use your gun in an unsafe manner. And the laws still apply in terms of, let's say, like, what's the difference between that? Like having a cocktail, having a whiskey neat on your porch and your firearm is in your bedroom. How is that different from having a joint on your porch and the firearm is in your bedroom? The criminalized conduct should be if you use your gun in a reckless manner. So if you get drunk, you get high, you go outside, you're firing off shots, you're going to get arrested, and as well you should. But if you are complying with all the laws, you're doing all the things to make sure that you're handling, you're drinking in a safe manner, you're using cannabis in a safe manner, you're handling your gun in a safe manner, why should you be prosecuted for it? So there's that. What do you think, Kelly?
You bring up a really good point, and I think it's really important to understand when, as you pointed out, when someone's filling this out, they'll think, okay, in my state, whatever state it is, if in fact marijuana is legal, it's legal. So, and think to themselves, I'm not doing anything wrong based on this question. Not knowing, to your point, about the federal implications, right? That's kind of a lawyer question to think about. How am I don't know, wait, and this is not only state, but you have to think about it. If you're doing marijuana, then you're going to have to put yes, even though in your mind you say, well, it's legal in my state. I don't understand that. And that can be kind of confusing from the form itself. And so is in fact, because of that fair for people who look at the form and honestly believe in their mind, okay, I use marijuana, but it's, I have a prescription. It's, medical marijuana, or the fact that in my state, wherever I live, all types of marijuana, medical or recreational, is legal. So in my mind, I'm filling this out and I'm being honest and truthful, but then in fact, there's a different implication because of it. That just doesn't seem fair, to hold someone accountable for that when in their mind, that was not their intent to deceive. That was not their intent to say, oh, okay, I'm holding back. I'm answering it this way because I know I shouldn't answer it that way. That just doesn't seem right.
Yeah. So, we will see what happens. I believe the rainfall of all the opinions tends to happen in the summer. So we have a few months ahead of us and waiting to see what will happen. But trust and believe, we will be back with the updates as soon as the Supreme Court rules. And with that, I'm Melba Peason, also known as the Resident Legal Diva, and I'm with Kelly Hyman, and this was The Breakdown. Stay safe, stay informed, and keep demanding justice. Take care.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.